Do you have any kind of assessment of the number of children that would be in need of assistance, and like how long they would be in need of assistance? Do you have any kind of idea?
Well, it's very rough. I think the government figures, but again, these are probably out of date already. The last that I heard was 120,000 people. Typically, about 50% of any kind of camp population is going to be children. You know, we think that's it's probably grown considerably since those figures were put together. So we are talking about, you know, tens and hundreds of thousands of people, and as I say, a big proportion of those are going to be children. In terms of how long, well, hopefully not too long, because, as I say, it would be really tragic if those children were to spend, you know, a good part of a year or even longer in a camp situation. That's something that we really have to see avoided, and we will be advocating very strongly to stop that happening. So we hope not very long, but it's very hard to judge at this point.
And like, one of the things that we've seen, like especially in places like Sri Lanka, the tsunami experience has been that there's this massive focus on the immediate aftermath of the tragedy. Then, like, you know, you kind of like reach a peak, and then it kind of like, you know, tapers off. Is there a possibility of this happening again? Yeah, will these people?
I think it's inevitable whenever there's a sort of an emergency situation. That's what happens, and it's not just in Sri Lanka. We see it all around the world whenever we respond to an emergency. Actually, the other thing that our team is very busy doing here in Sri Lanka is sort of winding down and fulfilling all of our commitments on the tsunami. So we still have tsunami programming going on now in 2009, but clearly only started, you know, when the tsunami hit several years ago. So Save the Children is one of the agencies that tends to, you know, not immediately back away from an emergency, but continue for the long term. And we've been here in Sri Lanka for over 30 years. And what will often happen is that the communities that we work with in an emergency situation will continue working with them afterwards as well in a more long-term stable situation.
And now, you spoke about education, you spoke about reuniting these children. What about, like, you know, their nutrition? I mean, obviously, like, you know, the little that we've seen of these people, they've obviously not had, like, you know, food,
proper
food.
nutrition. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Are you kind of looking into that?
Well, we were very concerned about that. It's particularly critical for children under 2, because children who have become malnourished under 2, if they don't get treatment, and if that isn't turned around before their 2nd birthday, then that can affect them for the rest of their lives. So they can be stunted mentally and physically. So it's very important that those children who, particularly any who might be suffering from acute malnutrition, as well as the chronic cases, are treated appropriately.
Right. And finally, I mean, how important is proper and continuous assistance and psychological as well as, like, you know, other assistance getting to these people? How important is it? I mean, like, because, you know, in media we hear a lot of things about assistance coming and this and that, but what kind of a role does immediate assistance play in these people?
Well, I think particularly for children, what we know is that, you know, children are incredibly resilient, and I see that in my own children. You know, they are able to overcome very, very difficult, traumatic, even, you know, deaths of close family members. They are able to do that if they're in a safe and protective environment, if they have, you know, enough to eat, clean water, and, you know, if they are in their family. So the damage done in the short term can be rectified as long as children are supported, and, as you say, not just, you know, in the immediate aftermath, but in terms of getting them back into a long-term stable environment where they can continue with their studies and with their lives. So there is a real opportunity here to make sure that there isn't lasting damage done, but at the same time there's a real risk that, because it is a little bit chaotic at the moment, because there isn't as much preparedness as any of us would have liked, that might not happen. So that's what all of the pressure on Save the Children, and in fact all of the agencies, that's what it's all about, getting us in there and able to respond to our fullest capacity as soon as possible.
And about access, does Save the Children have sufficient access?
Well, you know, that's what I was beginning to talk about, and up until now we feel that as an agency we've had decent access in all of the areas where we wanted to work, in terms of being able to get our specialists in to advise the teams on the ground. We are concerned, and we're beginning to see potential signs that that might get more difficult. Presumably with so many other agencies coming in, we have, I think, a good relationship in terms of people, people know who Save the Children is. We've been here for many, many years. I think that it's understood that we do, valuable work with children. I think as there's more of an influx and the situation becomes more chaotic, what we're seeing is that there might be less clarity. We've had 1 or 2 cases now where some of on checkpoints, more junior personnel manning the checkpoints, might be asking questions and causing delays and difficulties for some of our staff getting in, which we haven't had in the past. So up until now it's been quite good on access, but we are concerned that might become an issue going forward.
Okay. And 3 areas that came out as priority areas in the last few days from the government and the UN was shelter, medicine and food. Do you think that children should be included in that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's the problem. Often children, people think, oh, maybe that's just one small part of the population, but it is typically half of any kind of displaced group of people. So there's a huge number of children there, and I think it's important, and that's one of the things I want to highlight on this trip. Both with the Sri Lankan government but also with the donors as they consider their plans to think about the special needs of children.